What's up, peeps? So, have you wondered what does true leadership look like?
Mm.
Leadership in ministry, in business, in a nonprofit, in your community, maybe even in your fitness center, whatever that may be. That's something that you look at. What is leadership? But not just regular leadership and the average level, but what does being resilient mean? What does it mean to endure? What does it mean to be a leader that stands and withstands the tests and trials of life and things of that sort, because all of us are called to lead in some form or fashion. So today I got my boy Ian Dunaway with me here, and we're going to talk about resilient leadership and whatnot. But what's up, Ian? How you doing, buddy?
Man, I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm well. I
It's-
was just saying I was almost getting a little late here, just jumping on because one of those
yeah.
cyber trucks. There's a guy that
Oh, yeah.
pulled up just now. He pulled up with a Cybertruck. I'm in the same building with
Oh.
the electric company, electric
Mhm.
supply company, and gentleman pulled up. I said, okay, I just need to be nosy, and so I did a little quick interview with him and was kind of looking at, but it wound up being a good conversation of where he's at and about his father, and we talk about leadership in an area. This guy's fit. You can just tell he's fit. He takes it, but he's a pilot, and
Mm.
so leadership in our kids and versus also leadership in our parents when those roles are being reversed and what he's trying to do with his dad who needs to make some changes and things like that. And so
Mm.
that's why I got caught up in a conversation with
Oh,
that too
I
as
think it's
well.
great.
But it's part of life. It's like leadership opportunities are always around us, and it's in conversations that are all around us. So how do you see leadership just showing up in your life on a regular basis? Just something simple as that.
Man, I think you hit it on the head with so many guys as being fathers. And I think that leadership in your home is something it's crazy. I feel like just one is leadership in your home, but I think that we have somehow believed that what we do outside of our houses is more important than what we do inside. And that if I can just look good enough outside, or if I can accomplish things, and we have a lot of men and a lot of guys that, man, whether they are Christ followers or we're hoping that they're going to be that way, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, because God designed the home to work with men that cultivate their homes.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a huge leadership problem right now, is that we think that we're going to find our value somewhere outside of our houses. And the truth is, if your house is on fire, you can't do anything else. And you've got kids. I love listening back and forth to a lot of different guys. I think if you look at my library and don't always know where I'm at theologically, and you look at my podcast choices and always can't quite pin me down, that's probably a good idea that I'm balanced in a lot of things. But one of my favorite quotes was from a pretty prolific writer right now. And he said, your kids are the only people that are ever going to want a relationship with you just because you're you. And so often I think that gets taken for granted. And so I think that's a huge place. I also think that men are missing the opportunity to lead just relationally with people. I think we get so focused on the prize or on elevating ourselves that we forget to elevate those around us in a big way. And the truth is, good leaders and resilient leaders, this idea of resiliency is that you recover quickly and you recover from damage. Because the problem is we want our cake and we want to eat it too. You don't get to lead. You need to have skin like Teflon when you lead. It's got to be tough, and you gotta be able to see, things not stick to it. And so one of the things that I see is very often, more and more, I'm in my mid 30s, and I was always raised with people a little bit older than I was. And so I see in the last generation or two, this big idea of once I'm hurt, I'm just hurt. And then they shrink back and they don't do it. And the truth is, there is a time to be hurt. But if you want to be resilient, there's this idea that you've got to push through that. And a lot of that's a character. I think we can talk about what leads to that, but I think we're missing the absolute leadership opportunity of leading our peers in a way that is both healthy and personal and developing relationships. And you and I both know, the more technology grows, the more alone we tend to be.
That's right.
And so I think that we need to work on cultivating those relationships. Now, we could talk about leading and money. We could talk about making more money. We talk about building more business. But the truth is, if you're not healthy making your bed every morning, if you're not healthy keeping your house in order and your own personal self in order, then it's going to be really hard to lead others well, at least in the long term.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And this whole concept of self leadership is kind of what you talk about. And of
Mhm.
course,
Yeah.
in Christendom and in church, sometimes it's hard. Self care and self leadership. That's selfish. Like, no,
Yeah.
l- I love my neighbor as myself. We have been taught so well how to love our neighbor, how to love other people, the ones we care for, the
Mm.
love that we call the lead, also love our enemies. But we do, I think we do a poor job at teaching us how to love ourselves. What does that look like? It's not narcissistic. It's not, something that's out there. It's like taking care of myself, taking care of my temple, being a good steward of my temple. All the things we're
Mm.
talking about here, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, financially, all those areas
Yeah.
being taken care of is something that's not selfish. It's actually, I'm well, so I can take care of you. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a concept that I think sometimes we miss, miss in ministry sometimes, and because it seems to be selfish. And like, if you aspirations are our money mindset, for me, that I had to have a
Mm.
whole revamp around that, because I want the abundant life in John 10:10.
Mm.
I want to be able to have an overflow to help others. And so for my philosophy, when it comes down to finances, when you say I just want enough to be comfortable, to me, that's kind of selfish. Me, it's like, so
Right.
I can't help nobody else. It's like, I just want enough to be comfortable, just to take care of my
Yep.
creature comforts and this and that. And I get that
Mhm.
some folks are called to a life of poverty. There may be that in a mission field or whatnot, but
Mhm.
some of us are called to have abundant overflow where money runs through us, because I enjoy giving. I enjoy
Yeah.
giving stupid, obnoxious tips. I gotta have more. I gotta have enough money to be able to do that. But also, if somebody's called to the mission field, I want to be able to write the check.
Mhm. Yeah,
I want to be able to
absolutely.
pray. We do that part, but I also want to be in a position where I have an overflow of writing a check. So
Mm.
some of that, those mindsets about selfishness, I think, comes in a lot too. And something you mentioned about,
Mm.
getting over the thing.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
had a conversation with one of my clients in my studio who was out an entire week.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've been working together for a while, and so I know some of the tendencies that come up. And she said, "Well, this happened. I had a headache, and then and this kind of spirals. Like, momentum is working for you or against
Mm.
you, no matter what." And I said,
Right.
Here's kind of my rule: I can have a bad day, but I can't have two."
Right. Yeah. I think
So
that's fair.
like Ecclesiastes says, there's a time to mourn, there's a time. There's
Yeah.
seasons, and even was a guy, Joshua, who gave the people 30 days to mourn Moses' death.
Oh, I believe it was Joshua.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think Joshua, I can't
Yeah.
remember if God gave them or
You got a
Joshua did.
season
Yep.
and then
You
you
got
move.
30 days and let's wipe my tears and let's go to work. We on a mission here. So yeah, that's really
Well,
cool. You said that.
I'm gonna steal from somebody, and this, and I like how, I mean, just free flowing, because
Yeah, yeah.
it was a little bit. I jumped on and I'm like, I know you're gonna take care of me. I know it's gonna be a good conversation, but when you were like, well, we're just gonna jump on and talk, I was like, well, nothing to prepare for. And
Yep.
so, but I will tell you, the more we talk about this, I stole this from a friend of mine with his permission, and then preached it to our church, and was telling the story. And I won't tell you the whole story, but I have a really good friend. His name's John, and John was because you said Ecclesiastes and it just clicked on me. We've been preaching through verse by verse through Ecclesiastes, and we're just about to finish it. Which,
Okay.
I mean, we really like to pick books that are misnomer kind of books, and like, hey, it's not really that depressing. It's actually really good.
Right.
And so we've done 18 week where I just preached week 17. Then next week I'm preaching week 18, and so we are, in chapter 11, he kind of comes down to this point of towards the end of the book, and there's this general feeling, without repreaching the sermon, of, listen, things may not go your way, but to the person that waits,
Hmm.
to the person that waits on the wind to be just right or the clouds to pour, and he says, then that's not the right attitude. The right attitude to have is do with what you have now and be generous with the things that you have with other people.
Okay.
And he brings this idea up, and I kind of related it. I started with a story from a good friend of mine who's a pastor in Georgia, and he walked into just a devastating situation with a car accident and some families, and you got to think, this guy was
Hmm.
a D1 lineman, and Calvin, you've met me in person. I'm 5'9". This
Yep.
guy is 6
You're
foot.
huge. Because
Yeah,
I'm 5'9" too. So you're
of course.
towering individual.
We're
Yes.
huge until we meet this guy. And, and this guy he's about 6'6", and he just has this imposing presence, but he oozes pastoral care for people.
Mm.
And he
Hmm.
walks into a room of people he doesn't know. And there's a lot that he said that I told our church, but I think what's important here is that, and it applies to leadership, And it's really what I ended this sermon with. Is I said that if you want to be who God's called you to be, John stood up with these people and he said, listen, the worst thing we can do in this situation for the family, for yourselves, for the kids, for everybody involved, is to ask what if. He said, instead, we need to ask what now. And man, that resonated as I'm reading that passage. It happened a couple weeks ago, and I'm reading this passage in Ecclesiastes and just going, oh, that's what he's saying. And I think resilient leaders, there's this idea. It doesn't mean we don't get hurt. It doesn't mean we don't have to deal with stuff, but it doesn't stop you, because you stop asking what if, and you say, well, what now? Because I think what if is really interesting. It's kind of like a really good medication. It can help you see vision and have vision for the future, but it can very quickly become a terrible drug that freezes you. And so it moves from being, well, what if this changes? And what if we do something great, to, well, what if things had been different? Well, what if I could have done this? And people that lead and want to be resilient are people that ask what now, and they don't just ask what if, right?
That's good. It really is. It's a perspective change. It really is a shift in saying, unless you're saying, what if all these things work in my favor? But most of the time, it's not that. It's what if this happens, and what if that happens?
What if I was born this way? What if what if I was more gifted here? What if things had have just aligned? And well, that passage is just so funny, because he just says, I mean, that's the whole point of Ecclesiastes. You know what? Sometimes the race doesn't go to the swift. Sometimes the people that you think the strong don't win. And at the end of the day, if God is in control of all those things, then what is my responsibility? It's to keep on keeping on and doing what God's called me to do. And I think that there are going to be so many leaders in heaven that we'll never hear of and never know until we see them with Jesus, because at the end of the day, the greatest leaders are the ones that maybe we don't hear about. They're the ones that just do what they know is right, and they continue to do. I think that there's a weakness in church and in business. There's a weakness in this idea that I have to be known, because we do this idea. And that's, to me, that feeds an addiction, that feeds an insecurity. If I have to be known all the time, then what am I going to be when I'm not known? Yes. And I think that there's this beauty with men, and this strength with men to say, I don't care if I'm known or not. I want my wife and kids to thrive. I want the things that I do to be blessed. And I just want to work as hard as I can, because I can't control the outcome, but I know who does. And I just want to do my best in the midst of that. Yeah.
It's the influence and impact. Yes. The income part is there, but what's going to last longer? Probably the empowering conversation is, I kind of went from, like, we talk about legacy, our kids, and when we leave this earth. And I always said, I want a big funeral, not because I'm popular, because of these. I went deep with some of these people in their relationships, and something I did in their lives that mattered. And so for me, that was one thing. But then I started kind of saying, well, it's almost like folks that just can't wait till Jesus come back. I can't wait. I can't wait to get over there to heaven. I get it. I want to get there, but I'm doing nothing for the kingdom until I get to that kingdom. He says, on earth as it is in heaven. So I want to live it to the fullest right here. And so I look at every moment as a legacy moment. That gentleman I just spoke with, I have his number. I might have, the conversation we had may have been something that sparks up in his life.
Yeah, absolutely.
The opportunity to maybe speak to his father, that he may not have the same influence because you're too close, to your father. And so whatever that may be is, like you said, it's, what is that impact? What is the way I'm going to influence other lives? And it has to be intentional. It can't just be haphazard. I'm looking for opportunities to spread the gospel, to empower somebody, to bring joy to the situation. And so you have to be intentional with that. Like you said, the weakness, and I'm glad you said that, because one of my things, I despise weakness across the board. In all the areas, I just, physically, mentally, sports.
You must not like our culture right now.
No,
it is rife with the weakness.
No, it's this softening of this, and I think there's a part of like I said, where we're moving, and it's a slippery slope, because I don't want to ever get caught in the good old days. Yeah, some folks get so caught. Man, I wish we can go back to. We ain't going back. That ain't happening.
And that led us to here.
Yes. But how do we take what we've learned and apply it to the now? How we take what we learn there and apply it to now and say, what is resilient? What is grit? What is the way that some of these old men in the church, these older men in business, these resilient leaders, what do they do? And I can success leaves clues, and I can learn from what they've done, and I can look at failure leaves clues as well. Yeah. And so we see where the weakness comes from, and the whole dichotomy of where do we stand on issues? Where do we stand in the church and in the
Yeah.
businesses and things that said, where do we stand with our vision, our core values that may be kind of cultural, but at the same time, your calling is to be that. And
Right.
so that's a part where we have to step in, as you said, what is your role? What is your part? What now in from 2020? What now from, massive laws? What now? What do we do? And what's my role and responsibility? And it's going to come from my gifts.
Well, the truth is, if we tend to think that success means, I mean, success is a really loaded word, but we tend to think that success means that I do really well, I don't really struggle. And the truth is, the great leaders that we know, it's really funny how we tend to erase and rewrite history, that these great people never struggled with anything. Like the idea that, Abraham Lincoln, I mean, that's a really easy example, but that guy was depressed. That guy had a nervous breakdown. That guy went through so much, because at the end of the day, the way that God shapes believers and shapes his children in his kingdom is he shapes us through pain. He doesn't cause it, he uses it. And there's this idea that if he's going to shape, I think it's funny when I believe it's in First Peter, when they talk about the idea that we burn away the dross and we refine gold. I don't think that the dross and the gold like being thrown in the furnace.
No.
But at the end of the day, there's no better way. You said something though that sparked me, this idea of how you talked with, and I think leadership, day-to-day interactions, we miss that so often. I mean, leadership's kind of a buzzword too. And it's this idea of like, I think the best way to think about it is influence, right? How do we influence people? And if we know Christ, and I hope that everybody does, I hope that we get the chance to lead so many there. I mean, that's our mission in life. And if we fail at everything else, may we lead somebody to Jesus. And
it's called the Great Commission for a reason. Great. Yeah. There's a reason why.
Great. Yeah. So we should do it. Mm-hmm. But I tell this story occasionally when I'm preaching, when I travel and preach, and it's so helpful to me. And I thought you may enjoy it. But my dad, you think we're tall. My dad is like 5'3", 5'4", something like that.
My dad's 5'6".
I'm the tallest person in my family. And so when you see me, it's like, what is wrong with your family? And I'm just to tell you, we're very.
I just if you look at the post I did with my son graduating, we went to lunch, and I was looking at that picture like, this is the first time I've been in a photo with a lot of people, and I'm like a giant. Like that not happened at all on a regular basis. Too, so
it's crazy. When I go to my family, like I'm above everybody.
Yep.
And but my dad would always laugh. He'd say, when you're short, you can either be a jerk or you can be nice, but that's about all you can be. And he said, so I just figured I wanted to be as nice as I could be to people.
That's good.
But one of the things with him that I don't know if you remember this, I'm sure you remember this trend of bus church. It held on in some bigger churches in the 90s, but in the 70s and 80s, it was really big when the megachurch trend really kicked up. And churches would buy buses, and they would send like school buses, and they would send those buses into areas of their city and pick kids up and bring them to church. Okay, I've heard it. Yeah, it sounds really, it's been a long time, but it sounds really good until you realize that everything we talked about before about being in the home, reaching kids without, I did student ministry for about 15 years, just student ministry. Reaching students without reaching their families is a very rare effort. And a very rare outcome. And so, but we did that for like 2 decades. And my dad would just serve wherever he could serve, and at our church, and he would do what was needed. And so what bus ministry was like the jungle. And so when you went, it was like you were kind of crowd control. And my dad could teach probably, but he did a lot of logistics stuff, and he'd be there, but he would just sit and help watch students. So, they're not lighting something on fire over here. It was just a crazy environment. And there was this one girl, her name was Jenny, and Jenny gave her life to Christ at one point during these services, which is amazing. But Jenny grew up, and there's nothing wrong with this, but we know that if you grow up in a mobile home park or you grow up in environments, your environment will often dictate your future, because it's how you're taught to think, unless you change those things. And it was her words, but she would just sit, and my dad would just sit on these couches that they had, and students would come up and talk with him. And there was only a couple of conversations he had, but she sat down, and he was about 40 probably, and she was probably about 16. And everybody loved Mr. Will. Mr. Will had white hair, and he was just short. He was really nice. And she told him, she goes, well, Mr. Will, I hear speakers on stage and I hear them say, you can be anything you want to be, and you can do this, and you can be this person.
Yeah.
She goes, but I'm never going to be that. She said, I'm just going to be another pregnant out of marriage trailer park girl like my family.
Wow.
And my dad, and that was her words. And my dad looked at her and he said, Jenny, you need to understand something. He said, you can be anything that God calls you to be. And he said, you don't ever have to settle for anywhere that you are or what you do. He said, in my life, I had people tell me things like that too. He said, but you can be whatever Christ calls you to be. And he said that maybe once or twice to her. And then she, just like so many kids in that environment, disappeared.
Yeah.
And then it was crazy because he comes back and he, like 10 years, this is 10 years later. So I was really little when this happened. And then I was a teenager, and my dad got a postcard in the mail, like to our home address. And he just kind of like, I laughed at it. That's kind of like kind of a snicker. And then he sat down, and I said, what's that? He goes, well, let me tell you. And he flips it over, and it's from Romania, of all places, just this rando postcard from Romania. Yeah. And he flips it over, and it says, Mr. Will. She said, this is Jenny. I just wanted to let you know that I'm a missionary now in Romania. It turns out I could do anything that Jesus told me to do. Thank you for telling me that. And she signed it and sent it. And that was all he ever heard. But when you think about the absolute impact of one or two moments in your daily life, it should change how we treat servers and waiters. Mm-hmm. It should change how we talk with people in our family, because those moments are the moments people hang on to. And I think that there's a huge, I think that we have been trained and pushed to think that it's 3 or 4 big moments in our lives that really define us. And the truth is, it is just a horde of small moments that add up to what we are. And so anyway, those stories like that help me remember and understand the absolute power that it has to just be Jesus to other people. So,
dude, that's the life juice though. That's the
crazy,
story.
isn't it?
Those are things like that. That's what I'm saying. Legacy moments. You never know what spark of hope that you've given somebody that can thrust them even in the midst of the darkness. Because like you said, you bust somebody over, an hour and a half, 2 hours spent with us, and you go back to the rest of the 22 hours dealing with an environment that tells you what you're not, what you're never going to be, speaking everything against what Christ says you can be. That you're not being in that household. You're not being told that you're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not being told that. But in these few minutes with that, but it all adds up. And not having a father, and your dad being there, and just being a father figure to somebody who may not have the right father figure. And I think that's one of the biggest things, especially men and women. There's so many different ways as far as in father. I want to go into that, guys. If you're watching this live and have questions for me and Ian, please drop them in the comments. We'll love to answer them and address that. And of course, if you haven't yet, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube things and all that stuff. Share it with your peeps. But we already started kind of talking about our fathers, and you're talking about resiliency. We're talking about leadership. And I've been blessed to have a father in my household too. Wasn't a perfect father, but as far as I don't ever remember him not doing what he said he wasn't going to do. And he was somebody I learned dependability. And I think, like, I didn't come to Christ until I was 24 years old. And I think a lot of folks, where you say God is like a father, and the only natural example they have is their father on earth. And that depends a whole lot on how long you're going to be able to trust this guy like this. And so I always say it was actually an easy transition to say, oh, he's like my dad. He's a father. Cool. I'm in. But not everybody has that opportunity.
I think parents miss this so often. I've been teaching this to parents for years, and I hope it's stuck with some of them, but God designed you to design your kids that the first glimpse of who he is through parents. And that idea, and not that we can be perfect, but the idea, because my dad wasn't, your dad wasn't, I'm not, but this idea that we can glimpse and see part of the character of God through our parents is a really big deal. And you're right. Are you going to look at God and say, well, my dad was a no-show, so I guess my God. And here's what's crazy. I preach this every Father's Day when I get to preach. And this fact is, mothers are absolutely necessary to the home. But I think we've spent a lot of time really hammering that home. I think we have not spent a lot of time talking about dads. And if you want to look, and we don't have to do one at the expense of the other. I purposely fell into that trap. But one is not at the expense of the other. But I think we need to understand just the abject power that God has given and influence God has given men in their homes and how he's designed it, that when you have that, that if you don't have a dad in the home, your stats for crime, your stats for not finishing, your education, all of those things, they shoot up exponentially. And so if you have a mom in the home, and there's so many single moms that they need men, I think another way for leadership is to find families that have no dads and to help pour into kids. But on the other side of it, if you put a dad in a home and you have no other parent but just a dad, you only drop from that 100% likelihood of them doing well. You only drop down to an 80. And it is a massive difference. And I think that men have missed this calling, that you are cultivators, that you are designed to raise and to lift up people and to invest in them, and that what you do matters. Like your accomplishments, Jesus said, you can gain the whole world and lose your soul. I think that it follows that you can accomplish everything you want to accomplish in business, and it will be for naught if your family burns because of it. Absolutely. And that's the deal. If I fail at everything else, that's fine, as long as I don't fail at being a husband and a father. And that's my goal. And I want to be successful in other things too, but I'm always going to prioritize those things so that they're important. But you're right. I think that leads so many guys. So I feel like I'm a spiritual father to guys that are only 5 or 10 years younger than me, because so many dads over the last couple of generations, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever you are. Like we used to try and really pin this down, but it's an absence across the board. And I'll meet guys that they just tell me, well, my dad just didn't show up. My dad was an addict. My dad was abusive. And so you're right, pulling them in almost like a big brother. But I feel like Paul and Timothy, where he's like, I'm like a dad in the faith to you. And, I have a guy at our church who's absolutely, I won't tell a long story, but this is absolutely, I think you talk about life juice. God brought him into my life in the right time, because you miss that refreshment of discipling people, almost like God designed it that way.
Imagine that.
But I had a guy who came to our church for several months, and then he just disappeared. And we tried to call and text and then just see how he was doing. But I got a call about a year later, and it was 6 weeks after he was telling me the story, and he just said, well, I had written my note. I had my gun, and I was sitting on a park bench, and I was about to end my life. And he said, I had gun to my head, and I was just sitting there. And this guy he was in the Army. He was a paratrooper. But in basic training, he fell 300 feet and broke his back. Yeah. So he struggled with recovery and a lot of that stuff. So it really played into some issues that he had. And it was crazy, because he said, and I just think it's so funny how God, this is a side note, but God just says the right thing. He doesn't say the thing we expect or want.
Right.
So he said, I'm sitting here with a gun to my head, just about to pull the trigger. And I hear this voice. And he said, it just quietly says, why don't you just wait until tomorrow? Don't do it tonight. And I thought, that's not what God's supposed to say.
No,
don't do it. You're so valuable. You're worth something.
Right. You're worth it. You lean into my bosom. Come with all these things. Like, nah, wait till tomorrow, dog. Just hold up. Pause.
It's so crazy. And I was like, why would God say that? But interestingly enough, he didn't need to be told no. He needed to be told hold. And when he did that and he woke up, he said the next morning, he said, absolutely, something in me was fundamentally changed. And he said, I realized at that point, he goes, I realized now, 6 weeks later, he said, God kept me from going to hell. And he said, in that moment, he said, I would have spent eternity in hell. And he said, but for the last 6 weeks, I've been going to several churches. And he said, the pastors can't tell me how to get saved. And I went, you can go to better churches. And I led him to Jesus there. But this guy is a young guy who's got a 5-year-old son. He's been divorced. He's got a lot of things that were going against him. And what I think is so crazy is that in the last 2 years, I have watched, and listen, it's messy, it's hard, it's everything like that to disciple and to love.
Yeah.
I cannot find very many better examples of fathers than this guy after 2 years.
Wow.
And you want to talk about how fast something can change. Yep. It happens when I think we talk about 3. So one of the what I do is I'm a teaching pastor at a church, But I also, I spent about 15 years in the church until I decided and noticed that the church was struggling just to be healthy across the board, that most churches now are unhealthy, not healthy. And so along with this church, we're part of an organization called G6 Allies, where we help invest in and train ministry leaders, not just pastors, but ministry leaders to develop them. And so one of the things that when we look at those ideas, some of the stuff that we have identified, the three major things that we've identified, I thought this would be fun to ask you.
Yeah.
What do Karate Kid, now I'm like, oh, Remember the Titans,
okay,
and Lord of the Rings have in common? What do those have to do with resilient ministry?
They all have Smeagol. Okay, no.
What is that, a Karate Kid?
Yeah, they didn't have Smeagol in Karate Kid. Okay, Karate Kid.
That was fair.
Yeah, no, yeah, sorry, that's awkward. Karate Kid, Remember the Titans, and
Lord of the
Rings. What do they all have in common?
With resilient leadership, resilient pastors, or resilient ministry, whatever it is, and it would be the same in business too.
I mean, obviously going through the kind of the hero's journey. I mean, all of them had to go through the pit of hell, kind of so to speak, and then move into their greatness. I mean, that's what I see there. But they all had a mentor.
Yeah,
there was one person. They had the wise sage. They all had Miyagi and different folks that Chris Hopper on to say
grit. Nice, Chris.
Yeah, Chris said grit. So that could be part of it too as well.
So obviously, I'm obviously throwing the pastor's plight at you if I had a very specific answer, and you guys got pretty close. So when we talk about what we do, we're storytellers naturally, like as people, and we love stories. And so, and here's what we really, these are the three things that define a resilient leader, the general things. And then we create tools to help do these things. But one of them, the first one is Karate Kid. Man, everybody needs, like you said, a Mr. Miyagi. And the reason is because, I mean, we remember Daniel-san and put him in a body bag, Johnny.
Right,
that's, I always hear that going on.
Sweep the leg, Johnny. That's always coming. Yeah, first thing. Always use I. Okay,
we watch that though, and we see, and we identify with that. Why? Because all of us have problems. And then if you remember the brief scene after he gets just the snot kicked out of him by this gang, he gets one of those really poorly illustrated, looks like WikiHow books on how to do karate.
Yeah,
and he's terrible at it. And the truth is, he needed somebody to walk alongside him, and not only do that, but then what did he teach him? It was really basic stuff: wax on, wax off, sand the floor, and and paint the fence, and all of those things. And that, for us, the first thing you got to do is personal care, and you need somebody to walk alongside you, not to tell you the mystic secrets you're missing, but to help you see that sand a floor is a lot more important than you thought.
Basics.
You just need people, to objective people, and people you can trust. I think, Remember the Titans, we talk about this idea that, like, first of all, I don't know if any school in the country was dealing with a segregated school system. They were putting back together, having a black coach, a white coach that had been there before. I mean, you just think about the environment is so tough.
Right.
And Herman Boone comes to coach a totally different team, and he finds out he got something he did not expect. And I think for us, you look at this one, Herman Boone needed other coaches alongside him that would help him. He needed his leaders to come together. Well, why? Because he needed to develop a team of people. You want to look at any resilient leader, and we're talking about guys that are leading other people or doing their best to lead other people. You have to develop the team around you in order to see them succeed the way that you want to. And the third thing, Fellowship of the Ring, and is this idea that all of us, we may have some Boromirs here and there that in the forest, have betrayed us and hurt us. But at the end of the day, no leader will ever be as successful as those that put good men around them to help lead well. And so the third thing we do is empower networking, where we network good people from all over. And so, like, man, we do some really crazy stuff that I love. But we do this for businesses and we do it for churches. But like, we do what's called ally care, and we're able to provide coaching and biblical counseling for whether it's a pastor and their whole staff for a fraction of the price that you would pay to actually send them to counseling. Right. And we do coaching in that environment, so quite a bit. And we call it ally care. So we do that. We'll even do that for businesses. We'll do that for churches specifically. Then you go down and we do team development. We have this thing about called Growbox Teams, where we take plans because your team is unique, and we help you develop your team your way. And so we've had businesses that are like, my team, but they're terrible. They struggle with, they're arguing all the time. They can't work through this and that. So we uniquely build books and lesson plans and essentially break books down into videos so that your team can actually walk through all those principles together. And then the other thing is we bring people like you and partners like you together who are solid. And we do what are called cohorts, where we bring guys together and connect with them. And we lead cohorts of pastors all the time, where I've got guys going, I did not know. Oh, there it is. Growbox.
It's my Growbox right here. Imagine that.
The cool thing is,
it might be a little fuzzy, but I got it. It's right here.
Hey, it's good. It's but all of it to say, it's we want to network guys. So I've got guys all over the country in student ministry and in lead pastor roles. They're in cohorts, and they'll tell us the same thing. I did not know I was not the only one dealing with this. The fact that I have guys that have lost their jobs in cohorts, and they say, I don't know how I would have gotten through this. And so I think when you start talking about leadership and you start talking about leaders and resiliency, it starts with those three things: that you are taking care of yourself personally, but you're having other people do it. You're developing your team, and you're surrounding yourself with good people. The nice thing is we want to help you do each one of those things, and we can. But that's kind of our goal. And so when we look at it, you'll be hard pressed to find a leader in God's word that does not do all three of those things.
Yeah.
And you'll be hard pressed to find any leader anywhere that does not find those things across the board.
Somebody enjoyed that comment right there. I don't know who that.
I think they like that plug.
Yeah, with that little plug there. Somebody liked that plug there. And also, John was on as well and said we're crushing it, guys. So appreciate you, John, for jumping on live too as
John.
well.
John's the man.
Of course. So we're gonna go talk a little more about the where they go to get with you in a little bit here too as well. So learn more about that. But I want to circle back to when we talk about father.
Yeah.
What are some lessons that you learn about resiliency from both parents, but specifically as a father in the household, and if there are other men, coaches, leaders, or whatever that may have imparted some things inside of you, but specifically about dad, what are some things that you learned not just from his teaching but by his doing?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. My dad didn't have a whole lot of formal lessons for me. I think he taught me things, no doubt, but he liked to teach in limericks. I think this is the weirdest thing. It's just weird because I don't know anybody else's dad that did that. And he would have these. So we had a rubber stamp shop at one point. He's an entrepreneur, and he would always have it. He had one main business across the board, but at one point he had a rubber stamp shop business where a laser would engrave things. And so I have all these plaques of different, things. And, a few of the things that he told me, one that was absolutely critical to me, it's changed how I do leadership development. It's changed how I did ministry from the very beginning on. It just changed how I looked at life. Is that he told me that methods are many, principles are few. Methods always change, principles never do.
Yeah.
And in a world where, especially in the ministry world, people worship the things that they do, not the reason they do it. And so if we really get tied into methods, then we just get lost in the weeds in the back behind us. And so it really helped me just learn how to not get so caught up in how we're going to accomplish it this time, but in why we're doing it. And it helped me be much more creative and, I don't know. Innovative is a word that it sounds weird to say that about yourself, but it helped me innovate. And so like even success in ministry and reaching, we used to have 400 or 500 kids at a lot of student ministries that we had, and we would grow those mainly because we were just willing to say, I'm not going to marry myself to something that isn't the main thing.
That's good.
My dad would say, keep the main thing the main thing. I think we know that one.
I've never heard that one from fathers as well. Yeah.
I think he got a lot of good stuff too. My dad was not raised in a Christian home. Okay. And to watch, I have a lot of respect for men like you and women like you that give their life to Christ in their late 20s. Or mid 20s. I don't know if I would. I think that it would be, and I understand why the statistics drop when you do, because the truth is you're asking me to believe in a guy who died naked 2,000 years ago and walked around. Like, I get the book,
Absurd.
but
Absurd.
it feels absurd. But
Yeah.
when you're raised as a kid, some people go, well, I don't want to indoctrinate my kids. Well, you should, because
Yes.
somebody wants to. And it
Exactly.
absolutely blows my mind. I'm gonna bring it right now. Here's what blows my mind, Calvin, is that I have moms and dads that will tell me things like, well, I just want to let my child choose Jesus for themselves. Well, then you don't believe in hell and you don't believe what you say, and you just need to stop calling yourself a Christian. Because if
Facts.
you don't care about where your student ends, don't tell me when you tell your kid it's important to get good grades and it's important to do sports that somehow Jesus is something they just need to pick and choose over here. You teach him who he is.
Right.
Like,
right.
it blows my mind. And so, they don't know how to answer you when you say that, but man, a dad like I knew my dad told me when he led me to Jesus when I was 12. My dad told me over and over, it's one of the greatest lessons I ever heard, was you're responsible for your faith. Work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And you want to know what? I never had a choice if I went to church or not. And you know what? I didn't always like it, but you know what? I learned to love the church because my dad loved the church. We said the church is where, I said this the other day, I'm going to say it tonight to a parent meeting of parents that I have, that the church is where you learn about Jesus. Your home is where you learn how to love Jesus. And
good.
That's a difference. And that's what I learned. Your kids have why your kids have a love of some rando sport that's not even that enjoyable, like why your kid likes lacrosse.
Right.
It's because you take them all the time and you make it a priority.
And y'all sit at the couch and y'all watch it on TV. You talk about the stats, you do all these things, but we're gonna leave that one by chance.
100%.
It is. Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever. In same way, I came to Christ because my dad came to Christ at age 48.
No way.
My dad was.
I want to talk with your dad.
Yeah, my dad sold cocaine and marijuana out of our house. I grew up in that environment. It was nothing big time. Most of his friends and stuff like that. But at the same time, we had trees in it. We had a greenhouse in the attic, trees in the backyard. This is my environment. I didn't do drugs because I was embarrassed by my friends knowing my dad was that guy. So I can probably on one hand say how many times I smoked weed. I drank enough. I did a bunch of other stupid stuff. But that was something that. But my dad, at age 48, was the one who gave his life to Christ at that age. And so now I see this guy changing. I see him being a different person, different language, no alcohol in the house, not running women, doing these things. So I experienced that change. And even as you said, you learn about Christ at the church. We learn how to love like Christ in the home, but and you get to learn how to express Christ and experience that in the community. When you get sharpened, when you get all these things that's coming at you. This is the lab. This is where you put it into play. This is game day out there. And then how do you do this and interact with certain situations, especially when it comes down to, like you said, the traumas, the trials, the tests, all those things when they come. Now what's in you? And so, I learned it from he was in my ear. I can remember for years. I was in school in Duquesne University, Catholic University, and God was calling me out of that faith even then. But at the same time, I didn't know God was calling my dad out of death in his lifestyle. And he was in my ear. I can only give you milk right now. You're not ready for meat. I didn't know what that meant. I was really watching Sports Center, but the seeds were being planted. And it took about 4, maybe 5 years for me to finally sit in a church for the first time, opening a Bible, because I was an altar boy. I went to church on a regular basis. I knew nothing about what the Bible said other than what I learned in school about the apostles. I knew nothing outside of that. Never opened a Bible. First time ever. And sat at my dad's church in New Orleans. I came home. I was in grad school at this time. Opened up the Bible, and he went. I didn't know where to go. Showed me. I borrowed his Bible. Went to Corinthians, and every other sin destroys your flesh, and fornication destroys your body. I was like, I knew this was true. I knew the Bible was true, and everything it said is right, but I had no idea what it said. For the first time even reading that, it's like I'm committing suicide in slow motion.
Well, you talk about the letters of the Corinthians. How true is that of so many people, that we know the Bible is true.
Yes. And
yet the God of this world has put a veil over our eyes. And it's like, I know that's where it is, but we just don't go.
Nope.
But man, the power of fathers is so crazy. And the truth is, this is that what if, what now? Yeah. Do you not have access to fathers? Your father not who you wanted to be? Well, hey, we can't live in the what if. So what now is, you need to get married. You need to have babies. You need to get a job. and you need to be the dad you didn't have.
That's right.
And the truth is, my dad did things that irritated me or that bothered me, or he wasn't perfect. But the thing is, we get so, and I struggle to do this, but we get so caught up on the things that were not done for us.
Mm.
Like that I heard this from a pastor years ago that really helped change how I view things, because the last 2 generations, you got to fit when you have a 50-year-old, adult with mommy and daddy issues. It's like, come on, man, take the diaper off. It's time to learn how to potty train.
Right.
And so this idea of, even if I've struggled to resolve those things, I can't let those things control me. And so I need to build off of what my parents did well, and what off my dad did well, build off the great things, and then do your best to forgive the things that you can't fix.
That's right.
And I think there's just so much there, man. And like you're talking about, your dad was selling drugs out of your house, and I haven't heard anything negative about I learned this from my dad. I saw this from my dad. And I think that's a beautiful example of that. And so it's funny, our stories are so different, but the same.
Yep.
Is that my parents were, I was probably conceived in a church parking lot. I feel like I was in church 9 months before I was born, man. I was just there.
Right.
And so, and I was always in church, and but here's what that made me. We didn't do drugs out of my house. We didn't drink alcohol. We couldn't watch that. We were homeschooled. We couldn't do these things. And all of that to say, I became really good at hiding my sin. And sin hits us in I was a great Pharisee, and it wasn't until I was and that was the struggle, was the blatant sins. Well, of course we didn't do the big stuff.
Oh no, not the
we just did the stuff
star sins.
I wasn't dealing black tar heroin on the streets, but what I was doing was I was hiding a lot of things that nobody saw.
Exactly.
And I thought that if I could just hide them, it would be okay. And that it tends to be that I do really well with church, with crowds, whether they're de-church, they've had history with church. I do really well with those crowds because I tend to cut through all of that garbage and just speak truth, because I grew up in so much of it in that era. And I think, but it's interesting that it doesn't matter. It's funny that you and I have no business being friends and no business in where we grew up and anything, but because of Jesus, we're brothers. Yes. And I just think that's such a cool thing, man. And that's more leaders. I mean, the truth is, the more leaders and the more people that you allow and that you seek out for God to bring around you that have no business being around you, that's what you really start calling success in God's eyes. Is that you have good men around you to help lift you up. You have good men around you to help pour into you. And that when you do stupid things, they call you out. And when they do stupid things, they listen. And I think that should be our hope. I mean, we do this, I think, at every level that works. We do it a lot with pastors, and we do that to help pay our bills, but we would do it if we could pay our bills another way. We just do it all for free. Yeah. And we do that. That's part of what the church is based on. And that's what our personal life should be. So it's interesting that no matter what level you hit it at of resiliency, it always requires those 3 things: that we develop the people around us, that we're developing ourselves with somebody else, and that we are surrounding ourselves with good people in general. Yeah. I mean, you talk about Corinthians, what bad company corrupts good morals, right? This idea that, you should be engaging with people that are lost and broken. Kids always be like, in student ministry, it's like, well, I can go to the party because Jesus was hanging out with sinners. And I said, Jesus wasn't sinning with sinners.
Context matters, man. Context. We will make a whole new doctrine according to our emotions.
I know it.
I posted this a few weeks ago. The human capacity to rationalize just about anything is scary. It is scary how easy we can rationalize. Jesus he was there to change, not to be changed by them. Fool. No, come
100%.
Right.
And I would always hear that. They'd be like, well, what about Jesus? And I said, listen, if you can go somewhere like Jesus went, then fair enough, go that place. I said, but at the end of the day, Jesus never went somewhere that he wasn't speaking truth and that he wasn't helping other people. People, it's funny because I said this and I got like theologically checked a little bit. I was talking to our pastor and his wife that we work with here. And I said, man, I just don't know of a good book that has been written to help see how people flocked around Jesus. Now we can be equally as magnetic. And I said, we just need that. And Whitney said, well, let's be fair. People flocked around Jesus until they couldn't get anything from him anymore. And then they all left him alone. And I went, oh, Yeah, probably not a good book on that. And
Yeah.
the truth is, if you're willing to stay, like it just, I know that's a side note to what we're saying, but it's just
No, right.
interesting that the same Jesus that had crowds around him we may at one point have crowds around us, but we need to be willing to be alone and stand alone in a world. And so when we talk about, you should be developing community with believers, and you should be developing friendships to invite unbelievers into community. And I think the
Right.
difference for that is you should never ask unbelievers what you should do in your marriage. Why? Because they don't share the same values.
Different.
They don't care.
They're
And
they're
yeah,
natural principles that make sense, and and you can look at the psychology, you can
yeah,
look at social norms and things of that sort that is there is relevant. But once again, you try, and I think as you said, that the church has sometimes done a bad job of expecting non-believers to act like believers.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
we have different standards, there's different things,
Good way
so
to
I
say it.
can't expect them to do this way, but I expect believers to. And
Yeah,
so that's a part of it, knowing that I'm just going to love on you, like my studio. It's we open and close in prayer. It
yeah.
is you're gonna get 90% of music is Christian music, but we get all kind of folks to come in here
What's that
because
10? What's that 10%?
was that
What's that 10% of music that's not Christian?
oh
What's your favorite?
it ain't cussing, it ain't this and that. It's
I just wonder,
Imagine
are
Dragons.
you a Snoop man or what are you?
No, there's not. There's no Snoop playing in the gym. There's not Snoop going on. There's not Drizzy
I just
Drake. I
I
mean, I
just
don't.
teasing.
Yeah, none of that stuff. But it's like the Rocky theme, the
Right.
Rocky anthem, and so But once again, we ain't playing no cuss music. We ain't playing those things like
Yeah.
that too as well. So has the right message. But
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
fact that, but it's open to anybody.
Mm.
It's open to whoever wants to come in. And now, if you hate Jesus, you're probably not going to be here. But at the same time, we're
Right.
gonna love on you. And the same time, over time, that same person who was an
Yeah.
atheist or agnostic, hey, I know this is not kind of my thing and all, but would you mind praying for my uncle? Of course, yeah. And I've
Yeah.
seen folks who come to the faith the same way at the church. There's been an opportunity here for me to be over almost 16 years now as being a pastor to folks in the community that won't come join us on a Sunday morning at our church.
Yeah.
So the opportunities, like I said, we have to be the church and going out. And I think as we talk about this,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we still get caught in here's what business looks like and here's what ministry looks like.
Right.
Instead, I've always said I'm going to be the same person. You're gonna get
Yeah.
this Christ. You're gonna get this Jesus first. That's first and foremost. But at the same time, it's all encompassing. Now, I may be in a job or in a workplace that I can't fully just express my faith or whatever because I'm at another person's place. But there should be something different about you. There's something
Absolutely.
peculiar about you. There's
Yeah.
something different about when you go and you're still praying over your meal for lunchtime when everybody goes to lunch together.
Yeah.
There's certain things that still should be different, that those people should be called and led to when life is going crazy to come in and say, hey, hey, Ian, mind if I talk to you about something, right? Of course.
Hmm.
Because their
Yeah.
light is supposed to shine even in those environments. And you don't mean
Well,
that
yeah.
be as forthright. I'll give a quick example. When I was working at University of New Orleans, I was a strength coach and assistant athletic trainer there. It's a state institution. So I couldn't just
Right.
come out and just play my music in it's my strength my gym is over here. You're gonna do it like I had it was part of it. But if you ask, I had the volleyball girls after one training session, one girl asked me a question, and they all stayed there for 45 minutes. I'm kind of a baby in Christ right now, so I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing right now here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And 45 minutes they stayed after and just listened to my testimony and asked questions. We had church. But it was one of those things where here I am, send me, let me be available in this opportunity. So saying all to say is what you're seeing. What are the things that you see that may be different in business and ministry? What things are similar when it comes down to being a resilient leader in those extra environments itself?
Oh man, it's a really good. I think the similar thing is some of the similarities are, one that you're developing people always, and you're raising people up, and so that's. I mean, you look at it. It's funny because sometimes. I always say all truth is God's truth. And then that makes some people get uncomfortable. And I'm not saying that we can just go pick things and say it's true, but I think that anything that's true, it's going to be mirrored by scripture. And I think that if it's mirrored by results, it's because that's how God designed people. And so one of those things is that we develop people, but I do this talk. I can do it at businesses. I do it in ministry spheres because they're very similar. You're dealing with teams of people. But one of the things when you talk about toxicity, one of the main things that we need to do, that we have to do, is we need to focus on what invests in people before we ask them to make an investment for us.
That's good.
And I get it, because I'm part of the generation that goes, well, you work for a paycheck and that's their investment in you. And I get that. But the truth is, good leaders don't look at problems and whine about them. They look for solutions to the problems. And so, and I don't even know if this is a problem as much as it's a challenge, is that if you look at millennials, so that's most of a large part of the workforce now, and they did this stuff, and we are the I'm on the tail end of the very beginning of millennials.
Right.
You look at millennials, and they are a transient work-wise, or a transient, generation. And there was a study that was done, and they asked the question, what would make you more likely to stay long-term at your office? I talk about this with business leaders often when we talk about Growbox for their people, because we can take the principles of Jesus without the explicit naming of those things, and kind of be, in a cool way. We can help fund what we do. And we use Growbox in businesses. And so to develop them. And so, we talk about this idea of resilience with people. There was a company, and this is years ago. If you ever read the book Habits by Charles Duhigg, do you remember the story on Alcoa Steel? Alcoa is an incredible example of this. That when they had a new CEO, they were a steel company. They had a pretty good safety record in general. And their CEO is a former government guy, and everybody's like, especially in the 80s, it's like, I don't know if we want government guy, we're capitalists, and we want free industry. So he comes out, and their safety record was really good. It was pretty good. It wasn't bad, but they had plateaued profit wise. And so their new CEO comes up, he stands in front of the shareholders. I think it was like a 30-minute affair when he would talk about, he had a very systematic way of approaching those meetings. And he talked for, I think, 3 minutes. And the main part of his talk was, Alcoa Steel from this point on will be the safest company in the world. And then he just turns around and leaves. And the guy that's writing from his perspective, Duhigg is quoting somebody. Right. He said, I ran to a payphone. I called. I said, sell Alcoa. They're worthless. Alcoa, I think, tripled or quadrupled in company value and in revenue in the next 10 or 15 years. And it was because they focused on safety. And when people felt like their safety was a priority, they worked harder. And so, and I think that the idea here is, whether you're in the church and you're training volunteers and you're training staff and you're doing that, like good ministries are always adding to people, or you're in a business and you have volunteers with you, they asked millennials that what would make you stay long term, and millennials said, if people would invest in us more deeply than just job training. And so you ask this question that we're asking people to make an investment, and to be honest with you, we're asking a lot more in leadership roles than we used to as well. So to say, I just give you a check is not, we're asking them to buy into a mission. We're asking them to give so much. And how can we ask people to give when we're not investing in them too? And I think that's a huge similarity across the board, and believers should be the best at this. We should be the best investors of people. So, if you're a Christian businessman out here and you're listening, and you say, well, I'm not very good at that. Well, then go get good at that. That's your next development step. Go get good at developing people, and work on that. And I know we'll talk about it later. We got ways to do that. So you can always contact me or Calvin or whoever, but there are ways to do it. I think another thing, where they differ a lot, I'm just trying to give the major ones, but I think where they differ is going to be the bottom line. Now for a Christian business owner, I think that we need to look at our businesses like kingdoms, and we're not pushovers. And so there are times to fire people and to let them go. But I think that before that, there's got to be a lot of transformative grace and investment. But I think that any good leader knows messiness. Resilient leaders can handle messiness. Yeah. And because people are just, look at the Gospels, right? They're just messy people. But the amount to which we deal with that, it does change. And so when it's different in business, because at one point you just have to say, listen, we appreciate what you're doing. We've given you a lot of chances. I got to let you go. Yep. And you have to end them, because for your business, particularly, that person will not ever fit. And there's just no reason for it, and they don't want to be there. But then when you go into ministry, your bottom line is very different. And your bottom line is inherently messier. And the bottom line is the heart. And
Yeah.
what, I mean, what does Jeremiah say about the heart? It is exceedingly wicked. Who can understand it?
Right.
And in church, it's hard to balance. There are times of church discipline, but they're very rare. And so the idea of how do I keep loving people even when they keep self-destructing, keep letting themselves down? And I mean, some of the best stories and growth stories I've ever seen happen over 5 or 6 or 7 years. And we want them to happen over 5 or 6 or 7 months. And so, I think a big difference is in your business, your bottom line is that you got to keep people employed. You got to take care of people. You got to take care of your family. And you have to be able to say, hey, we're going to be done. In the church, it's a very rare occurrence when we look at people and say we're done, because Jesus is never done. And I think that maybe that's a good difference.
No, it is.
I think through.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. I'm gonna come back. Just want to come back to Grow Box and G6 there.
Oh yeah.
Somebody says, okay, and I'm hearing what you're saying about becoming a resilient leader. I want to become a more resilient leader in my family, in my church, in ministry, in my business, whatever the things that I'm involved in. I want to become a more resilient leader. What are some of the roadblocks or the challenges that may come up as you've seen working with in this area for so long? What are the things that the challenges that are going to come up that they may face, so they count it not strange when it does happen, because it's part of the process?
Yeah. The roadblocks to developing people and being resilient. As I'm thinking about it, it's funny, my mind, they seem to shoot in and shoot out of my mind. So I'll try to remember that. But here's the first one is always going to be time. Great leaders say no to good things and they say yes to great things. There are a million good things. There are very few great things. And knowing the difference between those is what's going to make you a better leader. And that's not so esoteric we can't grab it. So because here's the deal. Most of the time when we talk, pastors are an interesting breed, because they know that they have to admit that they struggle, but they're too afraid to admit that they struggle. So they'll be like, oh, what you do is amazing. It's so necessary. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Oh, I don't need it though. I'm okay. And but I know secretly, because I talk with so many of them later, that they go, I really needed this and I just didn't want to say anything. And good leaders and strong leaders are able to say, I need help with this. And so, but the biggest pushback we see is time. We have so many things that will take from us and that will take our time. And the truth is, we have to set boundaries. And I mean, we talk about time alone is a long discussion, but I think that you need to understand that you have to look at whether it's spiritual or it's more tangible, feeling that your ROI is the most important thing. So Alcoa Steel, he knew that his return on investment was going to be the safety of his people, but nobody else would have thought that. And so knowing those things, but for a pastor, are you, we have guys that pour into their volunteers. And here's the thing, when the economy gets tough, when giving is down, when your business is trying to make sales and you're just eking along, let me ask you this. Is it more important for you to pay money on advertising that you're already doing and not getting a return? Or is it better to develop better people in order to do better work? Like at the end of the day, there's that story about the two guys that every day they would chop wood and they would go meet each other, and one guy would leave and then he'd come back, and after an hour, and he'd always chop more wood than the guy that didn't take an hour off. Right. And you said, well, he said, what's the deal? He goes, well, every day I go home and I sharpen my axe for an hour. And I think that you need to be able to say, are you going to sharpen the axe of your people? Are you going to sharpen the axe of your volunteers? Are you going to make them better? Because if you make better, more innovative, more freed people, then it doesn't matter what the issue is. They will do better in general. And I think when you talk about roadblocks, we often say, I don't have the time to do that. I got to pursue other things. Man, I think another one is always, we're not very expensive to do what we do. And we did that purposefully because we're not trying to be rich. We're just trying to pay for our groceries. But at the end of the day, the investment is the other side of it. People will, it's funny, like to do a team of 10, to do what we're doing for a year, it's like $2,000. And I know this will date and you don't usually want to say that, but I need you to get this with me. I have student ministries that pay more than $2,000 for hot dogs in a year. And I say, hey, do you want to develop your lead? I've got all of these great reviews. I got all these guys that changed the ministry. Do you want to pour into your group, into your team and do this? And they go, I just don't know if I have the money. Well, you had the money. You had $2,000 worth of toilet paper at your last toilet
Right.
paper night.
You had it for all that pizza you bought. I mean, look, when I first came to the church we had now, the youth had pizza every Wednesday night.
Yes.
And we are the largest church in Marble Falls.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pizza. Just saying.
So much pizza. Well,
Yeah,
and like it just, but it blows my mind that, and you asked the question, and I'm telling you, this is, I sat in a room with the 50 biggest student ministries in the SBC, and I asked this question to all 50 of them. 2 of them gave me a yes response. The other 48, I said, "What are you doing to develop your students?" And there are churches that and I won't say it, but I'd say, "What are you doing to develop your leaders?" And the answer was, without fail, 48 of them said, "Well, nothing, but I know I should be doing something." And I think as a leader, it doesn't matter if this is in business or not. If you're not doing something to develop your people, it means you don't think much of your people, or you aren't taking the time to think what's really going to make the investment. And I think that it doesn't matter if you're business or church, the dirtiest phrase you will ever utter as a believer is not cursing. It's not some kind of off-color thing from a movie. The dirtiest phrase you will ever say is, "I know I should, but," because that tells me that I know there's something that's a priority, but I think this stuff's more important.
Yep.
And I know that God's told me to do this, but I mean, there's a whole testament in the Bible that is a whole people group that said, "I know I should, but," and look what happened to them. And so it's just, I think that there's this push for us that I see time get in the way. I see this idea of making an investment of like, well, I can't afford to do that. And like for most of the time for businesses, here's what's so sick to me. Most businesses will sink more money into developing and loving their people than churches will, because we're too busy trying to make the lights better or do this new thing. I'm just going to tell you the truth. Stop looking for the secret formula and just start working at it. I gave you 3 things: this personal care, team development, and empowered network. If you do those 3 things, everything else falls into line, because those are the things we were designed to be a part of. And so I don't know. I think time and money is usually where people go at. And then I think that there's this other side of just pride. We feel, and I don't think it's an overt arrogance. I think that it's a pride that comes from insecurity, that we don't feel like we're enough. So we've got to be. I see this with pastors a lot. I also see this with business leaders. Well, what I'm doing is great, and I know how to do what I'm doing.
Right.
And you see with pastors, and I say this all the time, if we were the experts, we curate resources. We don't write resources for this stuff. And I said, if we were all the experts, we wouldn't need books. And so just to say that you don't need something like that just tells me immediately that you're afraid to just say, you know what, I'm not the best at conflict resolution, or I'm not the best at visioneering, or I'm not the best at this, and I just need to bring in somebody who's the best. And the truth is, we will pay money to take people to conferences where they hear a leader. Why won't we pay to take them through a book that person has written? Yeah. And it's a very similar idea with what we do. And we see a lot of that struggle of, I either don't have the time, I don't want to make the investment, or, well, I should know this stuff, but I don't. And I think that there's this beauty with, if a leader says, there's a Harvard review done years ago where, a leader came in and she said, "I'm just terrible. I'm the worst at this, and I just need you guys." And she undercut who she was because none of that was true. Right. But that's not showing weakness. That's just saying that you suck. The difference is when you come in and say, "Listen, guys, we all need each other, and I can lead you, but I don't know everything. And I want us to work together to do that together." That changes the tone a lot. And we need more leaders to just be okay that they don't know everything.
That's good. We don't, because we always, like you say, it's called growth for a reason. There's a reason why we grow, not evolve. I'm doing my best to get that word out of my vocabulary for many reasons.
There's a good reason that trees don't just come 40 feet tall and
exactly. Thick. It just don't have a ta-da. It doesn't work that way. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. So obviously, we're talking about Growth Box, and John even says that Growth Box teams is the best. So tell me a little bit about Grow Box. Tell me, I already know, but tell folks about Grow Box teams, and of course, what all we talked a little bit about G6, and I'll do my best to be my best Vanna Black impersonation, and and let you into my world of grow box and whatnot. I think my wife already took all the like the snacks and stuff and all that
Well,
shit. No,
that's
there's some 2-year-old Cheetos. So like we met up almost 2 years ago.
I know it's been a long time.
It's almost 2 years ago, and I'm sad to say that. Well, I wouldn't have gotten it. I should have given this to the kids.
I think that
I don't eat that, but
snacks are the wife tax.
Yeah.
But so that box, it's crazy. We did it in a box. We also, for businesses, a lot of time we do it digitally because they don't want the box and they don't need that look. They just want the content. I think that's great. But I just need you imagine this. And this is the best way to explain it. If you come to me, you come to one of us, you just say, hey, listen, and for us, it's, we're not going to be real pushy salesmen with you. We want to talk with you. G6 says Cheetos have an infinite shelf life. I don't know if that's true, but that is my organization. So I'm just going to go.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. When does it expire? It's probably like
the day it was packaged.
2035. Nope. They're done. This is the 3rd of May, 22.
Dude, Cheetos and Twinkies never go bad.
So they say. I'm not going to trust it. I actually don't like.
I'm out.
Anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no. Well, so let's just we could use any group for a specific. But if you're a business or a church, it's the funny thing is when you deal with teams of people, it's usually the same thing. The difference between the church and because we do books that are business books we have a whole line of them. And honestly, we're always adding to that. I think we have over 100 books right now just in our repertoire. And so but as we're adding to, it's a big deal. We have a team that's read about 10,000 books over the last 20 years. We tallied it up. I'm not part of that team, but here I just get to be, and here's where my heart stands on it. For about 15 years when doing ministry, I still have leaders that call me from years ago and thank me for doing development with them. And because I just placed it as a priority to give books to people. But the funny thing is this, we all know that reading is the best way to grow. We all know that growing together requires discussing what we're learning and reading. But it does not follow that the absolute worst meetings we have with people are book discussions. They're the most awkward meetings.
Right.
They're the worst. But you need to do that. And I think that may even be a deterrent with people. But the other thing is, if you give people a bad book, you lose credibility with them. But how do you find? There are so many books, and you have to mine through all this. And so our team has read so many. They've read the good, the bad, and the ugly, and they want to find the best books for you. And so what we do is you would call me, and you just say, hey, listen, at my gym, my trainers, I really want to do a couple of things. One, they need to have a lot more candor, and they need to be better at working through disagreements they have. And then you say, but you may have a totally different thing. We do 3 things. You say for the second thing, I want them to have better customer service. Like I want the environment in here and they're doing good, but I want them to do better. I want every time somebody walks into my gym to absolutely know how incredibly important they are and to want to come back just to hang out because they think it's that great. And then you may say the third thing is I want to be better at, as we're hiring new people, giving responsibility to them and helping them do that. Well, those are 3 totally different areas to build in, but they're areas you need because every team is unique. And I think I worked in some of the biggest biggest Christian companies in the world, and we would do one size fits all leadership. And you know what? A poncho is one size fits all, but ain't nobody want to wear a poncho to a date night.
No.
And so you need a tailor. And so we tailor these things to your needs. And so we would say, oh, okay, listen, we're going to read. There's a book on Disney that we've recommended to churches to help them do a better job at connecting with people, but it's designed for businesses. You're going to need fierce conversations. And we're going to talk about that. And your group can go through that. And the third thing, we're going to walk you through Multipliers by Liz Wiseman about how you multiply, and great books. But what we do is and you may say, I don't know what the 3 things are. Well, we'll help you to identify those.
Right.
And you pick those 3 things. We'll give you 6 books to choose from. And then once you pick those 6 books or those 3 books out of those 6, and we send it to you all digitally. It's really easy. It's all done online. You can pick all of that. And then if you do that physical box, we're going to make a gift that's specific to your gym. So you may say, and it's really, we give some options, but we really work hard to make it the gift you want. So if you go, if it ends up being way more expensive than what we would do for a gift, we'll just give you the bottom line extra on it if you want to spend your money on it. And so like, we just want to be as honest and helpful as we can and all of that. But we have a gift. We actually do snacks. We send out a survey to your team so that you can get that later and we can get what we need. We can do t-shirts, all that kind of stuff. And we lay that out with the books, the gifts, the personalized snacks for them. And then we have a grow map on that actually explains, we break the books down usually we do it for either 6 months or for a year. And we would break those. There it is. We'd break those 3 books down into manageable chunks to read. But that's not where it stops. We take those books and then we make them into 3 to 5 minute videos. And each milestone that they read, there's a video that gives them insight, that explains to them, gives them insights they would know. It summarizes the reading and it gives discussion questions. And so when you get together with your team, whenever you want to discuss, your team already knows what they're discussing. And we know that nobody's going to be 100% for reading. And so even on days where somebody didn't get to read, they can actually discuss everything because they've got all the core points. And so when I lead cohorts of men, student pastors and people like that, I have them actually go through the videos about the books, and they don't read the books usually just because they don't have the time. But we've had almost 2 hour conversations based off of those videos. Right. They're that good. And so when you talk about what a small investment with your people that will pay dividends, John, who just said Growbox Teams is the best, John has taken over 50 volunteers through it for 2 years, and it's fundamentally changed his church. But you talk about your company. What happens when you say, most of the time when you say, I want to develop, we kind of look at people and we say, well, I just need to pick the best out of here. And you might have Gomer and Goober, and you got to pick between Gomer and Goober. But why do that when you can develop an Andy Griffith, right? Yes. And so when you talk about this, something like this is cost effective and it's easy, and it actually empowers your people to grow and to learn. And so that's Growbox Teams. The other things that we do are much more ministry centered, but we have an entire platform of master classes and cohorts and resources called the Allies.network for ministry leaders and Christian leaders and pastors to jump on. We're actually, I won't say who it is because we haven't announced it fully yet, but we're about to become a training hub and a platform for a missions organization that is worldwide. And so we're reaching people all over the world with this platform and bringing together great partners like you who do a great job of connecting and exemplifying Christ in every area that matters in our lives. And then Ally Care. I mean, imagine if you're a pastor or if you're even a business leader at a Christian business and you're the owner and you say, I want to have good Christian coaches and I want to have good like leaders, ministry coaches, leaders, whatever it may be. And then you want their spouses to have the same kind of support. So especially in ministry, pastors' wives bear so much of the brunt and get so little of the love. And so for us, I mean, again, time stamping and stuff like that, but as far as we know, it'll say the same. It's $1,000 a year for you to have 12 appointments. So a year's worth of appointments for not just 10 staff members or 10 deacons, maybe, or whatever it is your church setup is, but also their spouses too. So that's 20 people. That's 24 sessions of counseling, which is more like, $24,000. I mean, it's in the thousands range,
right.
High thousands. We're doing that as pastors and a biblical counselor and people like that working together, men and women, pouring in for $1,000 a month. And you can go as high as you want to, and those prices just kind of step up in tens. But doing that is absolutely changing the face of a lot of churches because they're investing in their people in a deep way and allowing them to have confidential investments and confidential coaching for the people. So you might say, well, I just need to talk about some difficult things. Or you may say, well, hey, I want to get from A to B. How do I do it? And we do all of that. And so that's kind of the design. The other side of it is if you're a pastor and you want a cohort that's worth your time, we bring together pastors and student pastors. Children's pastors is a new one that we're launching pretty soon, where we do cohorts of pastors based on your ministry. And we bring guys together and we resource you and walk through it with you and build a fellowship of the ring essentially around you, where we're going to deal with practical and clear stuff at an affordable price. So that's our goal.
Awesome,
But
awesome. And
I
I'll make sure
appreciate
you
you
guys.
telling me that.
Yeah, definitely. And I will drop some links in there in the show notes. So go back and drop those in there too for you
Yeah.
guys to be able to click on those links and check these guys out too as
Yeah.
well. So
Well, and one of the things I meant to say this, but one of the things that we've started doing the last year is that if you go to iandunaway.com, which I've sent you, I know I've got it there. Man, I will come out and preach events for you, preach your church, but I'll also come out and just train your leaders. I have this heart that if you bring me out for a weekend and you're paying me to come out and do something, use me and abuse me. So if you've got like 6 things you need to talk about and do, but man, I would love to connect with business leaders and pastors and anybody that needs a lot of the stuff we've talked about today.
yeah,
But
yeah.
if they need training and investment, I'm more than happy to do that and to work with anybody's budget on that. So
Beautiful, beautiful. Brother,
absolutely.
appreciate your time.
You too.
Man, it flies. This is almost an hour and 20 minutes. We were
Are they
rolling,
usually
dog.
this long?
No, but you
Oh,
just talk a lot. Now, when you get 2 preachers and the same message, it's kind of hard to kind of keep
Fair
the
enough.
schedule
Fair
down
enough.
here. So
Well,
yeah,
thank
we've
you
been
for having me.
closing for about an hour now. It's just that, it's just, it's the
It's
closing.
just too much good stuff, man.
Yeah, no, this has been great, man. So yeah, no, appreciate your time.
Yeah,
And folks,
honored
that
to
once
be here.
again, if you're watching, if you have not subscribed to the channel yet,
Come on.
please do so and get on the notification squad, all that stuff, that the YouTube stuff, share it. But also, if you know that your business or ministry could benefit from the things that Ian's doing and Allied Networks is doing with the grow boxes, all those things are amazing. And it could be that one thing that you're missing that will catapult for you guys to grow as it, personally, professionally, in all the areas of your life too. So appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely.
And we'll connect more.
Yep. Love you, man. See you soon.
Love you too, bro. All right. Holla, y'all. God bless. Go hard. Peace.